Big news broke today, right as we were about to go live. It looks as though Disney is going to delay the release of Snow White. It's not even called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's just called Snow White, right?
In all caps.
Yes.
So you know they're serious.
So Disney is delaying Snow White over a year until 2025. What do you think, ladies?
A whole year, though?
Year.
Because with the strike delaying production, that doesn't make sense with the timeline. And it also gives the Daily Wire more room to change their release date to be in the same month as Disney's version of it. So, I don't know. You're just giving Rachel Zegler more time to ruin the PR for this movie once the strike is over.
It moves from March 22nd, 2024 to March 21st, 2025. That's a long way.
Yeah.
Like, what episode of PCC will we be on in March of 2025?
I feel like Rachel Zegler would do best to just get this movie out as soon as possible and put it all behind her. But this has been an entire era of her life. She was cast as Snow White when she was 17, and she's like, what, 22 now?
Yep.
This is going to be like her entire young adulthood, basically, dedicated to this movie that's been terrible for her image. All
and
thanks
that
to
isn't
her,
even
of
coming
course.
out. Yeah, all thanks to her. She's the one who made the entire, well, her and whoever decided that only one dwarf should get the opportunity to earn a paycheck off this film.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's not absolve Gal Gadot either, because she was just as insufferable in those interviews,
Yes,
talking
she
about
was.
how we don't need a prince, and his scenes might get cut entirely. Maybe that's why they're delaying it. They're reshooting the whole thing to get rid of the prince.
They're just getting rid of it entirely. Well,
they might. That's at least what Rachel Zegler said. Is he's so irrelevant to the story. And this is such a non-love story. It's so wonderful that his scenes might get cut entirely because love doesn't matter.
there was you guys probably saw it, Teens and Screens, a report came out this week. Mm-hmm. And apparently Gen Z doesn't want to see any romance on the big screen or the little screen.
Headline made it seem more like they're uncomfortable with sex scenes, and that makes sense to me just because the amount of sex scenes in shows directed at Gen Z is so beyond the pale, like over the top.
It's a little much.
I don't buy
It's
that. I don't
too
buy
much.
that Euphoria is. I think Euphoria is for millennials. And
I believe
Gen Z.
they do want romance just the same way that teens who liked Twilight want romance. But the sex scenes are just insane, like distracting from the storylines.
The study cited the fact that they didn't care as much just about regular individual romance. What they want is they want to showcase relationships of all spectrums, because they said they want to see more stuff involving people that are asexual or aromantic.
Or aromantic, yeah.
Which sounded like aromatic to me when I first read
aromatic.
it, right?
What seems strange to me is that stories and entertainments used to be a way that you could see examples of what you could live up to. Aspirational, that would be a big part of it. Showing us traditional stories, traditional archetypes, things like that. And now the idea is that if what you're seeing on screen doesn't mirror your life, there's something wrong with on screen, instead of maybe something wrong with your life.
That was another part of the study.
That's a weird thing too. Yeah, because I was looking at that, and I found that to be very bizarre. Like I can see things on screen that I think are authentic, even though they don't mirror my exact experience.
Yeah, maybe Gen Z would feel repelled by romance storylines and sex scenes because they don't experience romance or sex as much as previous generations.
Well, yeah,
that's a thing. Like we've seen those studies as well.
They reference an epidemic of loneliness that's going on in the younger generations right now. Also, they're just beaten down constantly by fear porn, and they're constantly on edge in a way that previous generations weren't. It says 51.5% want to see more content focused on friendships and platonic relationships, with 39% saying they particularly want to see more aromantic or asexual characters on screen. A near majority of those felt that romance in media is overused.
That's ironic, since they're the generation that ships characters that are supposed to have platonic friendships all the time, especially male friendships.
They love the shipping back then. Granted, I'm sure those aren't the people. Also, no 10-year-old is answering this. It's like, yes, I would like to see more sex on screen. That's
of course not.
Well, but they didn't. It said that they didn't ask the question of 10-year-olds. They asked it over 13.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, even then, like the 13-year-olds, I guess the 13-year-olds might, but a lot of it just seems to be that the form of media is changing because the relationships between young people are changing. And I do think it goes back. I think the point I made when we were talking about it is that it was aspirational back then to look at these types of stories and be like, I would like to have a fairy tale ending like that for at least for the women that were watching the romantic comedies or were watching the Disney princess movies, and then the reality now of the relationship between the relationships between the sexes has kind of come crashing down on its head, and they're bombarded by things on the internet that pit the sexes against each other. I think there's a lot of negative feelings there amongst the genders that just make it harder for people to look at this type of entertainment and think about it as something that's plausible.
Right. I think that's true too. And no one wants to talk to each other. Everyone's just freaked out by talking to each other.
And now you can't even go watch. The other thing that bugged me about what they said, to get back to what they were saying about Snow White, was when they're saying like the movie's dated because it has a romantic storyline. I said, why? Do people not get married and fall in love anymore?
No one falls in love anymore.
Like, is that not a thing anymore?
We're all supposed to marry ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what it is, right? It's today's society is to narcissism. They even talk about how the point of the story for her is to find her power in being a leader, without realizing that that's not what most of us go out into the world to do.
Also, that's entirely untrue. Since I rewatched the animated version recently, or actually I think that was the first time I watched it ever because I wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid. I realized that Snow White, the character, is intensely focused on getting Grumpy to like her.
Yes, she's really
she wants outside affirmation and dreams of falling in love and tells them about it. She prays. There's a scene where she is actually at her bedside praying that Grumpy will like her. That's not really the fearless ball buster that Rachel Zegler's Snow White is going to be. Rachel
Zegler also said something about how Snow White's father encouraged her to go be powerful. And so I did the same thing. I did a rewatch of the original because I watched it when I was a kid. And then I went back into the, the Grimms, and I read that. There's no father in this. There was a father in Beauty and the Beast.
Her father is not.
But the father was really not in the movie. I mean, she's being raised by her evil stepmother. Lots of us can totally relate to that. And that's the story, She doesn't even have the stepsisters like in, the blonde
Cinderella.
Snow White. Cinderella, yeah.
The other thing they talk about not wanting in these movies these days is like love triangles, which was a staple of the young adult genre that was so popular in the early 2010s.
Oh, sure.
But also I think that for a story like Snow White, for these types of intricate stories, it's a lot of times today I think the youth see the idea of falling in love as kind of simultaneously both naive and for the women, a surrendering of your power and free will, because of the way they've been propagandized to think of marriage as
that's total
a surrendering of your autonomy, right? So it seems naive to them to fall in love. And to be fair, that could be our parents and our parents' generation's fault for the divorce rate being so high and being so few good examples of long-lasting relationships. Society and art mirror what we see in the world. So
even for a lot of the Gen Zers that weren't raised as children of divorce, they make content saying, my parents are still married, but it would be better for both of them if they got divorced.
And my son told
me yesterday there was an issue, and he said, "Well, I actually think it's you and Dad's fault because blah blah." And I really tried to not crack up laughing because he's a very serious person, and I take what he says very seriously. But when we finally got to the point that I have literally been dreading for a very long time, the point where everything that's wrong is actually, it turns out, my fault.
Hate it when that happens.
I really wanted to laugh, but I took it seriously, and I took the criticism to heart, frankly.
Our generation, my generation, grew up on a lot of movies that were highly critical of the unhappy suburban home.
Oh, right. Well, that's been around for a long time. Yes. Remember Stepford Wives? That was a whole thing. They were sort of weird animatronic robot type.
We're
things.
Seeing
they were the Chuck E. Cheeses of wives.
We're seeing the next step of those stories, right? Is that there's a growing cynicism about the idea of human connection, I think, for these movies. So in a way, she's not wrong that the story doesn't necessarily fit today's values, but that doesn't mean you change the story. It means you write a different story and make that story the one that represent what you believe today's culture actually mirrors.
Yeah, why can't anyone just write their own script?
Yeah.
Why is it always like remaking some other script?
I can actually tell you why that is, because they'll never green light that these days. It has to have built-in intellectual
At least
property
Disney
value.
won't.
Disney won't.
If you want to independently make a movie, then you're perfectly free to do so.
The
But
studios
you
won't
won't
give you the
get
money.
Yeah, you won't get the money that you want for it.
Then why isn't Daily Wire making their own script?
Well, they're doing it. Think
are
about
they
it.
like
because
is
this
a direct
belongs
reaction?
to public domain, they have the ability to make their own Snow White.
And it has
that's not the
built-in
case for a lot of
advertising.
the different Disney adaptations that are newer.
And it comes with built-in advertising because they get to play it off of Disney, which is a huge
that
market.
makes sense.
Right.
And that's like their bread and butter is like, here's the woke thing, and then here's us.
That's why this delay actually benefits Daily Wire.
Yeah.
They probably know that, right?
I guess so. It'll be interesting to see if they actually end up releasing at the same time. It's not like they will battle each other in the theaters. The Daily Wire one is going to come out on the Daily Wire streaming service.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll change plans. It's too early to say.
It would be interesting to see if they could get like Fathom Events to host like a limited release of the film,
Something like that.
at some studios. But I do think it sucks that these days the idea of the romantic story has to be something that is scoffed at. I don't see anything wrong with aspirational entertainment that doesn't actually represent what the culture is. When I watch most movies, I'm not looking for when I watch a Batman movie, I don't think that it actually represents the culture we live in, though I guess some areas of Chicago might actually look a little bit like Gotham. But in general, that's funny too, because they were filmed in the last few were filmed in Chicago, so that makes perfect sense. But it's like they always reference this point where they say it's not in line, it doesn't represent what the culture is now. I said, but classic stories have an audience for a reason, right? Because they stand the test of time. That's actually good that it doesn't represent today's values, because it's not
Today's
supposed
values suck.
Yeah.
That's why.
That's true. That's true.
And television was better even 10 years ago. You saw more normality than you do in what you see in the stuff that comes out these days. It's like what was I watching recently where I was actually shocked because they did a storyline. Oh yeah, it was an old episode of the show White Collar, where they and it's funny because Tim was bringing up Myanmar and Burma, and it was this episode where like there's a U.S. Who's been captured in Myanmar, and they're working to get him released through diplomatic channels. I was like, I don't even know if they would do that story now, because it would be seen as racist, or it would be seen as Americans policing the world or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
And that was 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago when that episode actually came out. And it just feels like the culture has shifted so quickly that it doesn't know where to go. So it doesn't know what stories to tell, because what you tell now, if you tell a story based on the culture of today, it will be unacceptable in 3 years at the most.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
There was an interesting thing where there was this woman wearing hijab in a video talking about how women should go along with polygamy. And, you know, this is, of course, pretty anti-conservative for a view, I think. But also, it struck me that it's actually a very left-wing view, that polygamy, because they're already on board with polyamory, like it's sort of the same thing.
That's the next, civil rights battle in their mind.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Where is she from?
Where was she from?
Yeah.
I don't know. She did not have a very distinctive accent, if I recall.
Okay.
It's like when Mary used the term polycule. I was so much happier before I ever knew it.
Me too, because that reminds me of like cuticles, and then I think of fingernails, and then I think it just seems very gross, like once you put all of those things together.
And make no mistake, what you're describing there, when they say they want to see the broad spectrum of relationships between humans, when they say asexual and when they say aromantic, that doesn't mean they only want to see that. That means there's also the kids who are going to be like, well, I heard that polyamory is big now. That will end up in stories, because that'll be right up Hollywood's alley to put that in stories.
Unlike how it is in reality, they'll pick hot people to be polycules.
You never see hot people in those pictures. It's always like one really giant lady and then like 3 trans guys wearing weird wigs or with like green hair but like the roots grown out. Yeah. Somebody has a baby, and then one guy who's like, I guess I have the job. I don't really know.
They did an episode of the show Elementary, the one with Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu, where it was like a polyamorous.
That show did not work.
I loved it.
I did not like it.
I loved it. Granted, I love the Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch as well, and I love the old stories. But I'm a big sucker for police procedurals. Okay. So seeing them work a lot of those.
Did you like the Basil Rathbones? Did you ever watch the Basil Rathbone Sherlocks?
Yeah.
Because those are pretty wild.
Those and all of those are vastly different too.
Yes,
that's what's cool about it. It's all so different from what you see in the other ones. But in this one episode, they had a polyamorous family. It's like 2 guys and a girl, and they're all doctors, and they're all like the guys are all tall, dark, and handsome, and the girl's super hot. And but the girl, she gets in the show. And I just think back to these one of the other trends that used to be a big popular storyline in shows like that was like the guy who's got 2 wives. He's like, he's got a wife here and he's got a wife here, and like, because that stuff has actually happened, right? People have actually been caught doing that. I noticed they never did
double family guys.
Yeah, I noticed they never did they never decided to subvert expectations and have like a ma. It would be hilarious to have them try to do a woman who had 2 families, but I'm still waiting for somebody to try and do that one where she's a traveling salesman and she's in Boston three days out of the week.
Death of a saleswoman.
Yeah. I would love to see that one, just to see them try to, because the guys,
she'd be a big pharmaceutical rep.
Yes, that's exactly what she would do. Or she'd work for like a marketing firm or something.
An MLM, maybe.
Yes.
Oh, that's perfect. It would be like yoga leggings. Like, remember that whole that whole thing? And one of her families, she would have had the children herself, and the other one, they would have had a surrogate.
Yes. Right. Oh, yes. Because that's the only way they'd be able to explain. I couldn't conceive, and so we had to have a surrogogate. Oh my gosh, we're giving somebody a fantastic idea.
This could be a very good
story right now.
It would be like, what was that? The Drew Barrymore show where she was like eating blood or something.
What? Remember? On her talk show?
No, was it Drew Barrymore? It was like a Netflix show. It was like something diet.
Oh, Santa Clarita Diet.
Right. Wasn't she drinking blood? Was it not Drew Barrymore?
That wasn't Josh Duhamel. That was Timothy Oliphant. Who was it in Santa Clarita Diet? I could be getting that wrong. I thought it was Timothy Oliphant, but I could be completely wrong with that. But I know what you're talking about. But yeah, we just gave them a
Mary
fantastic
looks like
idea.
she wants to leave. All of these ideas are making me uncomfortable.
Do you know what she is actually? She's actually a breast milk cheese saleswoman.
Great.
She does. Yeah.
Love that side hustle.
Really.
I also wanted to talk about the Mary Sue's hit piece against Brett Cooper, who is playing the Daily Wire's Snow White, titled "Fine, we can talk about the fever dream that is Brett Cooper's Daily Wire show." So some of this is criticizing the comments section, which is her show on there, but the rest of it is them harping on the Snow White remake. This says, Cooper joins the pattern of Daily Wire hosts that seem to dominate the network, failed actors and creatives bitter about Hollywood. Maybe those communist manifestos thrown at her were actually an actor prepares. You don't have to become a right-wing monster if you're bad at acting.
That is the funny line of this piece.
The idea that they leave Hollywood because they're not good enough at writing, showrunning, or acting is just completely anti-reality. It has nothing to do with their creative capabilities. It's the fact that you are forced to go along with social messaging.
I love the idea that one day she's writing a script and they just tell her it's bad. She goes, fine, well then I'm going to be pro-life.
I'm going to be a right-wing monster now.
You can't, it's like, she's not, like she's actually like a raging liberal, but she's like, now I'm going to, you can't make me. Now I'm going to go do this instead.
It says they're obviously now using Brett Cooper's quote-unquote acting background for Snow White and the Evil Queen.
She is an actress.
Yeah, like that's what she did before she worked for them.
Exactly.
Where is the lie? I'm so confused. And I was a theater major myself and know what her acting style is, and it isn't any good.
That's very
authoritative. They know they sound bitter,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's very authoritative.
Every time, any Mary Sue article that I've ever read, if you read it while imagining a cat in one hand and a boxed wine in the other hand, it always sounds more realistic.
One of these people is the failed actor who is starring in a movie. The other person is a theater major who ended up writing for the Mary Sue. Who in this situation is the failed actor?
Yeah.
Well, maybe she wasn't an actor. Maybe she was a failed director.
Either way, still, it's
Does she have any credits?
I
doubt it.
They also don't like Brett Cooper because she's kind of, in a lot of ways, she's not a normie, but the content she makes can be like watched by
to normal people.
to normal people, right?
Okay.
Like you don't have to be, if you went and you stumbled upon Brett Cooper's channel, the beauty of it is she does the videos where it's like Brett Cooper answers the most asked questions on the internet. Unless you went and deep dived into her politics, you could very much look at her as just an opinionated woman in her 20s without getting a huge whiff of like what her actual political views are, because a lot of the times when you're discussing social issues, yes, they can give you like an inclination of what somebody believes, but it's not fair to them to base all of your assumptions on a person based on how they interpret one news story that they watch online.
Correct.
Right?
It says they decided to get a young white girl to be their parrot instead of the same 3 white guys doing it. Let's just act like Candace Owens doesn't exist. Yeah.
But also, if they got somebody who wasn't white, then they would accuse that person of like internalized racism or a token or whatever. It doesn't matter what you do. They have like a plethora of comments and insults that they can just choose from. It's like a grab bag, you know?
I love that when they celebrate diversity, like really, really kind of condescendingly, but then when Candace Owens makes her videos, that's like the number one excuse they use to try and derail her, is to say that you're only doing it for a check or something like that, not understanding that to reach her level of success, there's a level of work and a level of dedication that is really immaterial to her views.
I see that a lot. You see that, somebody who's in the public eye will get criticized, and no one realizes that that's actually an incredibly hardworking person who's sacrificed a ton to get to where they are and to achieve that level and keeps having to work. I was talking to my brother the other day who was basically complaining about having too many opportunities and not being sure what he should do.
That's a good nice.
Problem. And I was like, you realize that this is what success is, right? Like, you are successful now.
Yeah.
And he was like, but I'm broke and I'm overworked and I'm tired. And I was like, right, that you're successful. That's what that is.
You're successfully broke and overworked and
correct,
tired, right?
Correct.
And for something like that, also there is an argument to be made here that, look, to be a very, very successful woman in media is not easy. That's not a woke idea. Is that there's the inclination that you have to be more than just your looks and more than just all of these things. It's long hours to do what they do, to do the research, and then you co-sign your name on everything you do. In a lot of ways. So it's the hierarchy of oppression, right? They can't get her because she's a woman or because she's not a guy. They can't say you're a white male, you're a black woman like Candace Owens. So they have to say it's because they placed you here. No. You work very hard in those jobs to do what you do, to get what you get out of it. And if I was somebody in that position, and I was as successful as they are, it would be insulting to be like, look, am I supposed to just roll over and say, yes, I was some product that was served to you? Even if that was true, you still have to be the one who shows up, does the work, and delivers, and actually brings in an audience that generates views and revenue. So the idea that either side dismisses, and the right does it too, when they dismiss these sites which aren't getting the ad revenue that they used to, right? But the people are still putting in the work. They're just not as successful as a lot of the ones going the other way. So I see a lot of it from both sides going back and forth. It's annoying when it's used to kind of demean an individual. Like I'm much less opposed to just telling a corporation to stick it than telling some person they didn't work hard, even if I disagree with them, because I don't know how hard they worked to get where they got. Right? And they don't have a right to tell Brett Cooper that she's not successful. She's just not successful by their metrics, which is to suck on the teat of Hollywood for supposed legitimacy, which they are craving and desperate for. She has no such craving. And she's going to laugh all the way to the bank to do so.
Right, exactly. They have no idea how bitter they sound.
No, they don't.
No self-awareness. Okay, let's go to Super Chats.
This author, this Rachel Leishman, who wrote the Mary Sue
Mary
story.
Sue chick.
Yeah, she has 4 credits on IMDb. I don't know what else she's done. She was in a short in 2014 called Apartment 8.
Okay.
She played herself on 2 TV series, Real Geek Girls and Well Actually, in 2017 and 2019. 3 episodes altogether.
If it's not Well Actually, then I don't want to watch it.
It's her entire personality.
And then, and then she was in I'm George Lucas, a Connor Ratliff story.
Oh,
Got
boy.
it. So
4 credits.
We know who the failed actor is.
Yeah.
Now
Brett Cooper was objectively more successful.
Objectively more successful.
Even
correct.
before she went to the Daily Wire.
Yes, that's correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.